The first shot was never supposed to happen inside the wire, but it did. A crack, sharp and close, tore through the motor pool as Private First Class Danielle Mercer ducked instinctively behind a Humvee. She'd been halfway through counting the magazines stacked in the ammo crate, lips silently moving with each number, when the noise stopped her cold. Soldiers nearby froze, their hands still on oily tools and fuel hoses, eyes flicking toward the perimeter as if disbelief alone might explain it away. Then came the second shot, closer, and the metallic ping of a round slapping against armor plating. This wasn't training fire, and it wasn't a misfire. This was someone aiming. Contact inside the wire, a voice bellowed, cutting through the paralysis. Danielle dropped the half-counted magazine and scrambled for her M4, the weapon propped against the crate like an afterthought. She slammed a fresh mag into place, every motion drilled into muscle memory, but her hands still shook. They weren't supposed to be in danger here, not in the green zone, not with HESCO barriers and guard towers hemming them in. That illusion shattered as soldiers scrambled for cover, boots thudding, rifles clicking, the whole motor pool transformed in a heartbeat from maintenance bay to battlefield. Through the corner of her eye, Danielle caught a blur. An Afghan contractor, one of the dozens who worked base logistics, bolting between vehicles with something clutched under his arm. A pistol cracked again. The man went down hard, face first in the dirt, but not before a grenade clattered loose from his grasp. Grenade. Danielle's body moved before her brain caught up. She launched herself flat against the ground, cheek pressed into dust, ribs jarred as boots thundered around her. The explosion was muted by distance and the shelter of the Humvee, but she felt the shockwave punch through her bones. Shrapnel pinged and whined off steel. For a moment, the air was nothing but smoke, curses, and the stink of burned rubber. Then silence again except for groans. She rolled over, ears ringing, and saw Sergeant First Class Riley crawling toward her, blood streaking from a shallow cut on his temple. His eyes locked on her weapon, then her. "You good, Mercer?" She nodded, though her chest heaved too hard to convince anyone. "Good," he growled. "Then get up. This ain't over." More shots crackled from the far end of the motor pool. Not wild, desperate fire, controlled bursts aimed. Danielle swallowed hard. Whoever these men were, they weren't just contractors flipping out. They trained. Riley yanked her shoulder and pointed toward the ammo shed. "Get there. Secure the damn crates. If they want anything, it'll be the rounds." She bolted low, adrenaline surging, weaving between vehicles as more soldiers engaged the intruders. Her boots skidded on gravel. Twice she almost tripped. Bullets zinged past, one sparking against a truck mirror that shattered in her peripheral. By the time she slid into the doorway of the shed, 2 other privates were already there, crouched low with rifles aimed outward. Their eyes widened at the sight of her. "What the hell's going on?" one demanded. "Insider attack," Danielle snapped, voice steadier than she felt. She dropped into position by the door frame, aiming her rifle downrange. "Keep these crates locked down." "That's an order." The firefight dragged for minutes that stretched like hours. Eventually, the base QRF, Quick Reaction Force, stormed in, pushing the shooters into a corner until they were cut down. The air smelled of cordite and fear. The medics worked quickly, dragging wounded toward the aid station. Danielle finally lowered her rifle, her arms trembling from tension more than weight. She'd counted only 32 magazines before it all began. Now, with the ammo shed still intact and soldiers standing bloody but alive, it felt like the count of her life had restarted from zero. Later, after statements were taken and the dead carried out, the colonel himself strode into the motor pool. His boots scuffed against concrete, his eyes cold and calculating as he studied every soldier. He stopped in front of Danielle. "You were on site when the shooting began?" "Yes, sir," she said, throat dry. "What were you doing?" She hesitated. "Counting magazines, sir." A strange flicker crossed his face, not amusement, not doubt, but something sharper, like recognition. He studied her for another heartbeat before muttering, "Of course you were." That night, while most of the company tried to sleep off the adrenaline, Danielle found herself summoned to headquarters. A major escorted her down a hallway lined with maps and radio chatter. The colonel waited inside a small briefing room, a file already open on the table. She braced at attention. "Sir." "At ease, Mercer," he said, waving her down. His voice was too even, too measured for comfort. He slid the file toward her. She glanced down and froze. Her name was there, but not alone. Below it, bold letters spelled out something she hadn't seen in years, something she thought buried under layers of classification and forgetfulness. Codename, Warden. Her mouth went dry. "Sir, I don't." "Don't insult me," the colonel cut in. We both know you weren't just some transfer from supply. I've read your file. The insider attack only proved what was already obvious. You've been wasted counting bullets in the motor pool. Her chest tightened. She'd run from that life. She'd buried it under quiet routines, half-meaningless duties, the simple safety of anonymity. She wanted to be Danielle Mercer, soldier, not warden, the one who'd done things most people couldn't even imagine. But the colonel leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You're going back in. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now. The words slammed into her harder than any explosion. She tried to protest, but he cut her off with a hand. You saw how easily today happened. Contractors with training and grenades inside our perimeter. That's not coincidence. That's infiltration. Someone's moving pieces on a board we don't even see yet. And you, Mercer, you're the only one here with the clearance and skill set to read the damn board. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. She'd sworn she wouldn't go back. But the echo of the grenade still rattled in her ribs, the smell of blood still clung to her nose, and the colonel's words dug deeper because they were true. If she stayed hidden, more soldiers would die. She exhaled slowly, jaw clenched. What's the mission? He slid another folder across the table. Inside were photos, blurry surveillance stills of men passing crates into trucks, maps of supply routes, annotated diagrams of convoys. You'll embed with a squad rotating to the outskirts. Your job isn't just to fight. It's to identify where this is coming from and stop it at the source. The squad won't know your code name. They'll think you're just a replacement. Understood. She stared at the photos. Each face stared back, hard eyes caught in frozen motion. She thought of the contractor running with a grenade, of the bullets inside the wire, of the magazines she'd never finished counting. Understood. The colonel's gaze softened, just barely. Good. Because if you fail, Mercer, this whole base becomes a graveyard. When she left the briefing room, the night was quiet. Too quiet. She slung her rifle tighter against her shoulder and walked back to the barracks, feeling the weight of a past she thought she'd escaped pressing down harder than the gear on her back. Inside the barracks, soldiers snored, shifted, murmured in restless sleep. Danielle lay down on her cot but didn't close her eyes. Her pulse throbbed, her muscles tight. She could hear every creak of the building, every breath of wind against the tarp. She knew she wouldn't sleep. Because now she wasn't just Private Mercer anymore. She was warden again. And in the morning, the war wouldn't wait. Morning didn't so much arrive as it ambushed the base. Generators droned, boots scraped against gravel, and someone was already shouting about coffee like it was ammunition. Danielle sat upright on her cot, lacing her boots with steady hands. She hadn't slept a minute. Not that anyone noticed. Half the platoon looked like ghosts dragged through sandbags. Orders came early. Her squad had been picked up for an escort mission out to a forward site, one of those skeletal outposts that looked more like piles of scrap metal ringed with dirt than anything resembling safety. The squad leader, Staff Sergeant Holt, briefed them while chewing on a protein bar. We're running resupply. Convoy leaves in 20. Simple route. No detours. If you see something shiny on the road, it's not a gift. Stay sharp. The men nodded, half listening, more concerned about shoving dip into their lips or double-checking their optics. Danielle adjusted her helmet strap and tried to keep her breathing even. Nobody knew why she was suddenly reassigned to Holt's squad. Nobody knew she wasn't really just another replacement. And that was how the colonel wanted it. Corporal Finch leaned toward her as they moved out. He was wiry, sharp-eyed, and radiated the cocky energy of someone who thought he'd survive the war just by grinning through it. Nubiha. Where you from? Upstate New York, she answered without looking at him. Cold as balls, he chuckled. You drive stick. 'Cause Holt's gonna throw you behind the wheel sooner or later. Better hope you don't stall while we're taking fire. Nobody forgives that. Danielle managed a dry smile. I'll keep that in mind. They loaded into the Humvees, engines rumbling alive, radios crackling. Danielle ended up in the back of the second vehicle, rifle across her lap. She scanned the landscape as they rolled out, flat desert stretching forever, distant mountains painted in hazy morning light. The convoy moved in that strange rhythm, slow enough to feel exposed, fast enough to feel reckless. Minutes stretched. Heat built. Sweat trickled under her body armor. Soldiers muttered half jokes, half prayers. Then the first boom hit. The front vehicle lurched sideways in a spray of dust, flames licking from its underside. An IED had chewed through its axle like paper. The convoy screeched to a halt, soldiers shouting over the comms. Contact front. Dismount. Danielle was already moving, boots hitting the ground before the Humvee fully stopped. She took cover by a tire, scanning the ridgeline. The crack of rifles answered them, muzzle flashes sparking from concealed positions. Ambush! Holt roared. Return fire, suppress that ridge. Bullets chewed into dirt near Danielle's boots. She squeezed her trigger, sending short controlled bursts toward the muzzle flashes. The squad fanned out, some dragging wounded from the burning Humvee, others laying down suppressive fire. Finch belly crawled next to her, grinning like a lunatic even as rounds whistled overhead. Hell of a first day for you, huh? She didn't answer. Her focus tunneled in on a figure darting between rocks higher on the ridge. The movement was too disciplined, too precise. She steadied her aim and fired. The figure dropped. But more replaced him. They weren't ragtag fighters. They moved with coordination, covering each other, their fire staggered and efficient. Danielle's stomach nodded. Whoever these guys were, they weren't just insurgents, they were trained. Mercer. Holt barked, pointing to the crippled lead Humvee. Get that ammo crate out before it cooks. She sprinted through gunfire, heart hammering, the wreck spitting black smoke and heat. She grabbed the crate handles, muscles screaming under the weight, and dragged it clear just as another round of small arms fire pinged off the vehicle. A soldier stumbled near her, clutching his leg, blood dark against his camo. Without thinking, she grabbed his vest and hauled him behind cover. He gasped in pain, eyes wide. You're fine, she said firmly, pressing his hand tighter on the wound. Keep pressure. Don't you let go. Mercer were pushing left flank. Holt called. She grabbed her rifle, fell in with the squad as they bounded from cover to cover. Finch tossed a grenade uphill. The explosion echoed, scattering dirt and screams. Danielle fired again, catching another fighter as he rose to shoot. Their advance slowed, but inch by inch they clawed ground until the ridge finally fell silent. When the smoke cleared, the squad stood breathing hard, ears ringing, eyes darting for threats. The front Humvee burned down to its frame, but most of the squad was still alive. 3 wounded, none dead. By convoy ambush standards, that was a miracle. But Danielle's mind wasn't on the miracle. It was on the way the enemy had moved, disciplined, rehearsed like soldiers. Back at the base, Holt debriefed with the colonel while the squad slumped around the barracks, stripping gear and bitching about the heat. Finch dropped next to her, peeling open an MRE. You pulled that ammo crate like a champ, he said, grinning through exhaustion. Strong for a skinny one. Gotta be the New York winters, huh? Danielle smirked faintly, but her eyes kept drifting to the floor. Later that night, she was summoned again to headquarters. The colonel didn't waste time. Well, he asked. They weren't local fighters, she said flatly. They used staggered fire, bounding overwatch. That wasn't tribal tactics. That was military training. The colonel nodded grimly. That's what I thought. You think they were contractors? Not contractors, she said, shaking her head. This was organized. Someone's feeding them playbooks. He slid a map across the table, red circles marking suspected routes. You'll keep embedding with Holt's squad. Eyes open. If you see anything, patterns, signals, whatever, I want it reported directly to me. Understood. Danielle clenched her fists. The codename on the file still echoed in her head. She hadn't wanted to be warden again, but every step of the day dragged her deeper into that role. Yes, sir. Over the next weeks, the squad rolled out on mission after mission. Escort here, resupply there, sometimes nothing more than patrols that ended with sore feet and sand in their teeth. But each trip bled into the next, every road thick with tension. AEDs kept popping, ambushes kept springing, and every time the enemy moved like soldiers. The squad noticed her quickly. Her instincts were too sharp, her eyes too quick. She saw ambushes before they happened, called out positions nobody else spotted. They joked about her being psychic. She didn't correct them. One night, while cleaning rifles under a flickering light, Finch leaned close. You ever do something else before supply duty? You don't move like a paper pusher. Danielle looked at him, debating how much truth to give. Finally she shrugged. Had some training. Before. Finch grinned. Figures. Don't worry, newbie, your secret's safe. As long as you keep spotting those bastards before they smoke us. She forced a laugh, but inside her stomach twisted. The line between Mercer and Warden blurred more each day. The breaking point came during another escort, this time through a narrow valley. The squad's nerves were already frayed, radios filled with static. Danielle felt it before she saw it, a wrongness, a silence too thick. She shouted a warning, but the world erupted before the words finished. RPGs slammed into the convoy, the shockwave tossing her sideways. The Humvee behind hers erupted in fire, screams cutting through the comms. Gunfire rained from both ridges, a kill zone perfectly planned. Chaos. Soldiers scrambling, bullets tearing dirt, Holt barking orders drowned in explosions. Danielle crawled to cover, fired at shadows on the ridges, dragged another soldier out of a burning vehicle. Through the haze, she saw them. Two figures not firing but signaling with hand gestures, coordinating the ambush like officers. Her pulse spiked. This was it. The source. She shouted into her comm, 2 leaders south ridge by the outcrop. Holt swore and redirected fire. Finch lobbed grenades, others poured rounds. Danielle sprinted closer, weaving between cover, every instinct screaming. She squeezed her trigger, dropped 1 leader. The other bolted, disappearing into the rocks. By the time the squad secured the valley, the second leader was gone. But they'd captured gear, radios, maps, documents that shouldn't have been in the hands of local fighters. Back at base, Danielle laid the captured items on the colonel's desk. He leafed through them slowly, eyes narrowing. "You were right," he muttered. "This isn't insurgency. This is coordination. Someone's building an army under our noses." Danielle crossed her arms, jaw tight. "And we're just driving supplies into their kill zones." The colonel looked up sharply. "Not anymore. From now on, Mercer, your squad isn't just bait. You're hunters. Find me the source." She swallowed hard. The soldier part of her itched at the challenge. The human part recoiled. She'd wanted to be invisible, forgotten. Instead, she was back at the center of the board. That night, alone on her cot, she stared at the ceiling and whispered to herself. Not Mercer. Warden. Her pulse slowed. The name fit like a weapon drawn from storage. She hated how natural it felt. But she also knew one thing. The next fight wouldn't be survival. It would be pursuit. The hunt began before sunrise. The base still hummed with the echo of generators and restless soldiers when Holt gathered the squad around a hood of a dusty Humvee, maps spread like a gambler's hand. The colonel's orders were blunt. No more convoys as bait. From this point on, Holt's squad would track the men who had turned valleys into kill zones. Danielle listened in silence, her helmet under her arm, eyes fixed on the circled red notations on the map. They weren't just lines of terrain anymore, they were arteries of war. "Here's the deal," Holt said, stabbing a finger at the valley stretching toward the border. "Intel from the captured radios puts their supply chain somewhere along this sector. They're moving weapons through goat tracks and wadis we'd never notice unless we got out of our damn trucks. So guess what? We're getting out of our trucks. We hump it from here old school." The squad groaned collectively. Dismount patrols in the open desert were misery incarnate. Heat, no cover, no quick ride back if things went south. Finch muttered something about joining the Air Force. Danielle adjusted the strap on her armor and kept her face neutral. Inside, though, her pulse had quickened. This was the kind of operation the colonel had dragged Warden back for. They stepped off at dawn, the desert air cool enough to trick them into thinking it might stay that way. By mid-morning the sun was brutal, turning their gear into lead. Every footstep crunched on gravel, every breath tasted of dust. The squad spread into staggered formation, rifles up, scanning ridges and gullies. Holt moved steady and grim, while Finch cracked jokes over comms just to keep the silence from swallowing them. 3 hours in, Danielle's instincts prickled. She slowed, scanning a rocky outcrop that seemed too clean, too deliberate. She crouched, brushing sand away to reveal a disturbed patch of earth. Wire snaked just beneath the surface. "Hold," she hissed, raising a fist. The squad froze. She pointed to the wires. "Pressure plate," Holt muttered, grimacing. Damn near walked right into it. The squad carefully skirted the IED, each man giving her a look that was equal parts respect and unease. Finch whispered, "How the hell did you even see that?" Danielle just kept moving. She couldn't explain it to them, how the world sometimes slowed, how the patterns in dirt or silence lit up like signals only she could read. Warden instincts, honed from another life, refused to stay buried. By afternoon they found the first cache, a shallow cave stuffed with crates. Not the rusted AKs and jerry-rigged explosives they usually found, but clean rifles, scopes, even medical supplies still in plastic wrap. The markings weren't Afghan. They weren't even regional. Holt ran a finger across the stenciled letters, frowning. These came from somewhere else. Someone's paying for this. Danielle felt the weight of the crates in her gut. Whoever these fighters were, they weren't scavengers. They were building an arsenal with intent. They rigged thermite charges and burned the cache to ash, smoke curling into the wide sky. But fire was a beacon. By the time they were a mile out, the first shots cracked from the ridgeline. The ambush was fast and brutal. Bullets rained down, forcing the squad into a dry riverbed. Holt barked orders, returning fire uphill. Danielle slid into cover, sighting targets. She spotted 2 fighters leapfrogging positions, disciplined, coordinated. She squeezed the trigger, one dropped, the other vanished. Pin them down. Holt shouted. Finch, Mercer, on me, we're flanking. They scrambled up the side of the wadi, boots slipping on loose stone. Rounds whipped past, snapping into rock. Danielle dropped 1 fighter mid-reload, then another who broke cover too long. They crested the ridge and cleared the last position, leaving silence and smoke behind. When it was over, the squad regrouped, bruised but intact. 1 soldier had taken a round through the shoulder but would live. The rest were drained, sweat-streaked but alive. Holt clapped Danielle's shoulder, his first real gesture of approval. Good eyes again, Mercer. You saved our asses twice today. She nodded, though the praise felt heavy. Every time she leaned into warden instincts, the squad looked at her differently, like she wasn't one of them, like she was something else. They made camp in the ruins of an abandoned compound that night. The walls were cracked, the roof half collapsed, but it gave them shade. Finch passed out jerky, cracking jokes about the Air Force again. The men laughed, their voices raw but grateful for any humor. Danielle leaned against a wall, helmet off, listening but distant. Holt sat near her, cleaning his rifle. You've done this kind of thing before? He said quietly. Danielle's stomach tightened. What makes you say that? The way you move. The way you see things the rest of us miss. That's not supply duty training. She forced a shrug. Guess I read the manuals more carefully. Holt gave her a long look but didn't press. He just nodded slowly, like filing away a note he'd revisit later. They moved again at dawn, pushing deeper into contested territory. Days blurred into heat, dust, gunfire, and exhaustion. Each night they camped in ruins or dry wadis, eating rations, tending wounds, whispering about home. Danielle rarely spoke. She watched, listened, and filed every detail. On the 4th day they stumbled on something different. A village, not abandoned but quiet. Too quiet. Children peeked from behind doorways, women carried water in silence. The men were absent, which told Danielle everything. Holt sent 2 soldiers to speak with the elder. The old man's eyes were wary, his words cautious. Holt came back shaking his head. They know something, he muttered. But they're too scared to talk. Danielle's gaze swept the rooftops, the alleys. She saw it, the faint movement of cloth in a window, the glint of glass. A spotter. Contact, she hissed, pointing. Before Holt could react, gunfire erupted from the outskirts. Fighters swarmed from alleys, rifles barking. Civilians scattered, screaming. The squad dove for cover, returning fire. Danielle sprinted to a corner, laying down bursts to keep fighters back. She saw a woman clutching a child caught in the crossfire, frozen in terror. Without thinking, she dashed forward, grabbed them both, and hauled them into a doorway as rounds chewed the wall. The woman sobbed thanks in broken English. Stay down. Danielle shouted before rejoining the fight. The firefight dragged on, brutal and close. Fighters used alleys and rooftops like they owned them, coordinated in waves. But the squad pushed back, clearing one position after another until the last rifle clattered to silence. The village was wrecked. Bodies lay sprawled, walls pocked with bullet holes. Civilians wailed over the fallen. Holt looked grim as he checked his men, 2 wounded, none dead. Finch spat in the dirt. They turned a damn village into a battlefield. Bastards. Danielle knelt, wiping grime from her face, but her eyes locked on one of the fallen fighters. He wasn't local. His gear was too new, his skin too pale. She searched his vest and pulled out an ID tag, not Afghan, not even regional. She froze. The letters were Cyrillic. That night, back at camp, she handed the tag to Holt. He turned it over, frowning. Russian? Spetsnaz, she said quietly. Or at least trained by them. Holt stared at her. How the hell would you know that? The words slipped before she could stop them. Because I've seen them before. The silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. Holt studied her, eyes narrowing with questions he didn't ask. Finally, he pocketed the tag and said only, "We'll report it up the chain." But Danielle knew what it meant. This wasn't just insurgents with better rifles. This was foreign operators, bleeding a proxy war into their valley. And if Russians were here, more would come. Sleep was scarce that night. The squad lay in silence, each man lost in thought. Danielle stared at the stars, her mind replaying the firefight, the civilians, the Cyrillic letters. She thought of the colonel's words, "You're the only one who can read the board." The board was bigger than she'd feared. And every move they made put them deeper into a game no one had told them they were playing. When morning came, Holt didn't question her. He just gave orders. Pack up. We move at first light. If Mercer says she's seen this before, I believe her. Which means we're in deeper shit than we thought. The men trusted him. And by proxy they trusted her. That was both a relief and a weight. As they moved out, Danielle adjusted her grip on her rifle and whispered to herself again. Not Mercer. Warden. The desert wind carried the name like a secret. The mountains loomed closer with every mile. The air grew thinner, sharper, as if the peaks themselves were warning them to turn back. Holt's squad trudged through the winding valleys, boots grinding against rock, each man weighed down by more than just gear. The Russian dog tag burned in Holt's pocket, a silent reminder that what they were walking into wasn't just insurgency, it was something larger, darker, and far more dangerous. Danielle felt it in her bones. Every ridge line looked like a rifle barrel waiting to open up. Every silence was too deep, too manufactured. The enemy had discipline, patience, and a playbook. And her squad was still playing catch-up. By midday, Holt called a halt near a cluster of boulders overlooking a dried-out riverbed. The squad dropped their packs, gratefully gulping down water. Finch, as usual, was the first to break the silence. You ever notice, he said between swigs, how every valley looks like the last? Like we're walking in circles, waiting for someone to take a shot at us. Shut up, Finch, muttered Rodriguez, the squad's medic, wiping sweat from his brow. Danielle sat slightly apart, helmet off, scanning the ridges through her optics. She wasn't looking for shapes. She was looking for patterns, the way birds lifted off suddenly, the way sunlight glinted off something that shouldn't reflect. The world spoke in details and Warden knew how to listen. She caught it, a faint shimmer like heat mirage but wrong. Too straight. Blast. A scope. Sniper, she hissed, ducking just as the first round cracked. Dust exploded where her head had been. Contact. Holt roared. The squad scattered, rifles up, bullets snapping around them. Finch swore loudly, crawling behind a rock. Rodriguez dragged one of the younger privates into cover as rounds peppered the riverbed. Danielle steadied her breathing, peering through her scope. The sniper was good, patient, disciplined, shifting positions with precision. She tracked him, exhaled, and fired. Her round hit inches from his cover, forcing him down. 2 shooters, she called. North Ridge staggered positions. Holt relayed her call and the squad shifted fire. Grenades thumped, smoke curling. Danielle crawled higher, searching angles. She saw the second shooter lining up on Holt. Time slowed. She fired, one shot clean. The figure toppled. Got him, she muttered, but her gut twisted. That was a professional shot she'd just beaten. The firefight dragged, but eventually the ridge fell silent. The squad advanced cautiously, climbing the slope. They found the first sniper sprawled, his gear too advanced to be local issue. Modern optics, imported rifle, encrypted radio. Holt crouched, frowning. They weren't here to ambush a convoy. They were here waiting for us. Finch whistled low. So we're famous now? Danielle's chest tightened. If these operators were hunting them specifically, the colonel had underestimated the scale. Someone knew Warden was back in play. They stripped what intel they could, smashing the rest, then pushed deeper into the mountains. The terrain grew harsher, jagged ridges funneling them into choke points that screamed ambush. Danielle kept them alive with her instincts, calling out traps before they sprung. Holt stopped questioning her warnings, he just followed them. By the third day, exhaustion was etched on every face. Sleep was shallow, food scarce, water precious. But the mission drove them on. Holt's men had shifted from grumbling to grim determination, their trust in Danielle unspoken but real. That night, under a cold canopy of stars, Holt sat beside her while the squad dozed. His voice was low. You're not who you say you are. Her hand froze on her rifle. She didn't answer. I don't care what your file says, Holt continued. No supply clerk moves like you. No rookie spots snipers and IEDs before the rest of us blink. You've done this before, hell. You've done more than this. So tell me straight, who the hell are you? Danielle's throat tightened. For weeks she'd kept Mercer and Warden separate. Now the walls cracked. I can't, she whispered. Holt studied her in silence, then nodded once. Fair. But if you're holding back something that keeps my men alive, I'll take your silence as betrayal. And I don't forgive betrayal. His words cut deeper than any bullet. She wanted to tell him everything, but the colonel's warning echoed. They can't know your code name. So she nodded. Understood. The next day everything snapped. They crested a ridge and found themselves staring at a compound tucked into the valley floor. It wasn't mud huts or caves, it was fortified, sandbagged, antenna bristling from the roof. Trucks lined the yard loaded with crates. Fighters moved with discipline, hauling gear, maintaining weapons. This was no insurgent camp. It was a staging ground. Holt's jaw tightened. Jesus Christ. Look at this. Danielle's chest burned. She spotted men in mixed uniforms, patches scraped off, gear too standardized to be scavenged. Among them she saw a figure directing traffic, barking orders in Russian. Her stomach dropped. This was it. The source. "We can't take that head-on," Rodriguez muttered. "They'll cut us apart." Holt looked at Danielle. Thoughts. Her instinct screamed. This wasn't a fight they could win with bullets. But leaving it intact meant convoys and villages would keep burning. She exhaled. "We hit it at night. Sabotage the trucks, plant charges on the ammo. We can't take them all out, but we can cripple them." Holt studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, Warden." The name froze her blood. She stared at him, stunned. He smirked faintly. "Yeah, I know. You think I don't listen when colonels whisper in corners? I don't know what you did before, but I know enough. You're Warden. And tonight you're gonna prove it." The name hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The squad didn't hear it, only Holt. But it was enough. The secret was out. That night they crawled down into the valley like shadows. The compound glowed with dim lights, sentries pacing. Danielle led them, her senses sharp, every nerve screaming. She guided them past patrols, through blind spots, to the trucks. Finch planted charges under fuel tanks, grinning through adrenaline. Rodriguez rigged detonators. Danielle slipped through the shadows, marking crates, cutting wires, mapping the camp in her head. Then she saw him, the Russian officer from earlier, standing in the glow of a lantern, talking into a radio. She crept closer, heart pounding. His words were clipped, urgent. She caught fragments, coordinates, timelines, mention of Phase 2. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just a supply hub. It was a launch point. She raised her rifle, finger on the trigger. One shot and the officer was gone. One shot and maybe Phase 2 stalled. But her comm crackled softly. Holt's whisper, "Warden. Time to exfil. Charges are set." She hesitated, torn between mission and instinct. Kill the officer or obey orders. Her finger trembled. She chose. The officer lived. They slipped back into the darkness, hearts pounding, adrenaline burning. Minutes later, fireballs lit the night as the compound erupted. Trucks shattered, ammo cooked off, fighters screamed in chaos. The squad scrambled up the ridge, flames roaring behind them. At the crest, Holt turned, watching the inferno. "That'll slow them down." Danielle nodded, but unease gnawed at her. The officer still lived. And Phase 2 still loomed. When they returned to base days later, battered and gaunt, the colonel was waiting. His eyes swept over them, pausing on Danielle. "Report," he said. Holt dropped the Russian dog tag and a charred map onto the desk. "Foreign operators. Staging ground. We hit their trucks, burned their supplies. But they're planning something bigger." The colonel's gaze sharpened. "How do you know?" Danielle hesitated, then forced herself to speak. "I overheard the officer. He mentioned Phase 2. Timelines. Coordinates. They're not just harassing us anymore. They're building to something." The colonel's jaw tightened. He looked at her, eyes unreadable. "And you didn't take the shot?" Silence stretched. Holt glanced at her but said nothing. Danielle's chest tightened. "No, sir." The colonel's face was stone. "Then we'll find out what Phase 2 is the hard way." When she left the room, Holt caught her arm. His voice was low but not unkind. "You hesitated. You'll have to live with that. But you're not alone in this anymore. Warden or Mercer, you're one of us. Don't forget it." She nodded, throat tight. For the first time, the name Warden didn't feel like a curse. It felt like a burden she didn't carry alone. But the unease never left. Phase 2 was coming. And next time, hesitation might cost them all. The desert night stretched cold and endless, but Danielle couldn't sleep. The camp around her was quiet, soldiers snoring in their cots, distant generators humming, the occasional thump of rotor blades as a Black Hawk ferried supplies. Yet her eyes stayed open, fixed on the thin line of stars overhead. Phase 2 haunted her. The Russian officer's voice replayed like a ghost, coordinates, timelines, a tone of urgency that spoke of something enormous. Her hesitation gnawed at her. She could have ended it right there, silenced him, disrupted the chain. But she hadn't. Holt's words lingered, "You'll have to live with that." And she was. Every breath reminded her of it. By morning, the base was alive with controlled chaos. Convoys lined up at the gate, intel officers scurried between tents, and a briefing had been called for all squad leaders. Holt gestured for Danielle to follow. She grabbed her rifle and fell into step. Inside the briefing tent, the colonel stood over a map pinned to a board. Red markers dotted valleys and towns, while lines traced probable routes. A dozen officers crowded around, faces grim. The colonel's voice was sharp, clipped. Satellite scans confirm unusual activity along these ridges. Movement of vehicles at night, consistent with staging for large-scale operations. Local informants whisper about an attack. Timing matches what Specialist Mercer overheard. His eyes flicked to Danielle briefly, acknowledging her without warmth. We're designating this enemy initiative as Operation Scythe. Murmurs rippled. Scythe. Finch muttered under his breath. Sounds friendly. Holt shot him a look to shut up. The colonel stabbed a finger at the map. If Scythe launches, it won't be isolated ambushes anymore. It'll be coordinated strikes on convoys, bases, and possibly civilian centers. The presence of Russian advisors elevates the threat. We cannot underestimate this. He scanned the room, eyes narrowing. Your orders are simple. Confirm Scythe's scale, disrupt it, and report back. You'll move into the Central Valley tonight. Intercept comms, locate their command post, and gather proof. Do not fail. Dismissed. As the officers filed out, Holt lingered. Sir, with respect, we're running on fumes. My squad hasn't had real downtime in weeks. The colonel's stare was cold. You'll get rest when Scythe is ashes. Until then, your squad is point. You have something the others don't, her. His chin tipped toward Danielle. Her stomach sank. Holt stiffened but didn't argue. When they left the tent, he muttered, Congratulations, Mercer. You're officially my squad's secret weapon. No pressure. Danielle tried to smile, but it felt brittle. Better than being dead weight. That night they moved. The squad was silent as shadows, slipping into the valley with practiced efficiency. Holt took point, Danielle just behind, eyes scanning the darkness. Rodriguez carried the heavy radio, Finch lugged extra explosives, the others kept their rifles ready. The valley floor was littered with ruins of old stone houses, crumbled and swallowed by sand. The squad wove between them, using shadows for cover. The moon hung low, silvering the jagged cliffs. Then Danielle heard it, a faint static hiss in her headset. She froze, hand up. Signal. East Ridge. Holt nodded, gesturing the squad down. Rodriguez fiddled with the receiver, adjusting dials. Voices crackled through the static, Russian and another dialect Danielle didn't recognize. She listened, piecing fragments. Convoys. Deadlines. A mention of Hammerfall. Her skin prickled. Hammerfall. Another layer of Scythe? We need higher ground, she whispered. To triangulate. They climbed carefully, rocks shifting under boots, rifles slung tight. At the ridge, Danielle set up her scope while Rodriguez aligned the antenna. The signal sharpened. More chatter. This time, English slipped in, gruff voices with American accents, distorted but clear. Her blood iced. Americans. Not allies, mercenaries. Contractors working with Russians. She looked at Holt, heart hammering. It's bigger than we thought. Before he could reply, a spotlight flared below. Voices shouted. A patrol. Down? Holt hissed. They pressed flat against the rocks as beams swept. The patrol below was disciplined, no drunken laughter, no sloppy pacing. These were soldiers. The squad held their breath. Then Finch's boots scraped against stone. The sound carried. A shout rose. Gunfire erupted. Contact. Holt barked. The squad opened up, rifles cracking, tracers streaking the night. Danielle picked targets with icy precision, dropping one patrolman then another. But more lights flared from the compound below. Engines roared to life. Trucks. Reinforcements. Fall back. Holt ordered. They scrambled along the ridge, bullets snapping around them. Rodriguez cursed as rounds chewed the rock near his head. Finch tossed grenades to slow pursuit, the blasts echoing through the valley. Danielle covered their retreat, firing controlled bursts, every shot measured. But she knew they were outnumbered. This wasn't a skirmish, they'd stumbled straight into the hornet's nest. They broke into a ravine, panting, scrambling over rocks. Holt slammed them into cover, barking orders. Rodriguez, call it in. Mercer, eyes out. Rodriguez jammed the radio handset to his ear. Static. Jamming. They're blocking comms. Danielle swore under her breath. She peered over the rocks. Trucks were fanning out, headlights slicing through the dark, soldiers spreading to encircle. They're hurting us, she realized aloud. Holt's face was grim. Then we break the herd. He glanced at Finch. You still got that C4? Finch's grin was manic. Always. Minutes later, they rigged a narrow choke in the ravine with explosives. The squad pulled back, hearts pounding. Trucks rumbled closer, voices shouting in Russian. Holt held the detonator, waiting. Waiting. Now, Danielle whispered. The night split with thunder. The ravine walls erupted, fire and rock engulfing the lead trucks. Screams tore through the chaos. The blast shook the ground, dust choking the air. The squad bolted deeper into the ravine, using the smoke as cover. They ran until their lungs burned, until the gunfire faded behind them. Finally, Holt called a halt, collapsing them into a dry cave. Everyone was bleeding, scraped raw but alive. For now. Rodriguez slammed the useless radio against the wall. We're cut off. They'll be hunting us all night. Finch wheezed, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. Hell of a camping trip, huh? No one laughed. Danielle's hands trembled, though she forced them steady. She thought of the officer she'd spared, of Hammerfall, of the American voices on that comms line. Pieces of a puzzle she couldn't yet see. Holt crouched beside her, face hard. You saw it, didn't you? The scale. This isn't just Russians stirring the pot. It's bigger, cleaner, professional. She nodded. They're building to something coordinated. Hammerfall, it's part of Scythe. Maybe the main thrust. His jaw tightened. And we're sitting ducks. The night dragged, filled with tension and whispered planning. By dawn, they slipped from the cave, moving cautiously. Exhaustion dragged at every step, but fear drove them. The valley was enemy territory now. Midday, they reached a plateau overlooking a small village. Smoke rose from chimneys, goats wandered between huts. But Danielle's got twisted, too quiet. Then she saw them. Trucks parked at the edge. Soldiers in mixed uniforms moving door to door. Villagers corralled in the square, rifles leveled at them. Her stomach knotted. This wasn't a raid. It was a message. Holt's face went cold. They're making an example. Danielle's voice was sharp. We can't just watch. Finch looked at her like she'd grown horns. We're 6 against 50. What exactly do you propose? Throw rocks. But Holt didn't dismiss her. He studied the scene, calculating. They've got civilians lined up. If they kill them, it's a massacre. He turned to Danielle. Ideas? Her mind raced. We hit their vehicles. Explosives on the fuel tanks. Create chaos. Use the distraction to pull villagers out. Rodriguez swore. That's suicide. Maybe, Holt said grim. But leaving them to die isn't an option. The squad fell silent. The choice weighed heavy. Finally Holt stood. We move. Mercer's plan. Let's go. Danielle's chest tightened. Her plan. Her responsibility. They crept down the slope, shadows against stone. Finch slithered under the trucks, planting charges, grinning like a madman. Danielle and Holt covered him, rifles steady. Rodriguez whispered prayers under his breath. The charges blew, fire ripping through the vehicles. Chaos erupted. Soldiers shouted, running in every direction. Villagers screamed. The squad opened fire, precise and lethal, cutting down guards around the square. Danielle's shots were flawless, cold. She felt nothing but focus. Go. Move them. Holt bellowed. Rodriguez and another private herded villagers toward the ridge, shielding them with their bodies. Finch hooped, tossing grenades into the confusion. But then Danielle saw him, the Russian officer, the same one from the compound, dragging a child as a shield, pistol aimed. Their eyes locked across the smoke. Recognition flared. Time slowed. She raised her rifle. No hesitation this time. She fired. The officer jerked, collapsing. The child broke free, sprinting to safety. Her chest heaved, adrenaline flooding. The ghost was gone. But the battle wasn't over. Reinforcements poured in from the hills. The squad fired, villagers scrambling up the ridge. Holt dragged the last of them, shouting over the chaos. They barely made it out, sprinting for cover as bullets chased them. Explosions thundered behind. The village burned. On the ridge, Danielle collapsed, chest heaving, rifle hot in her hands. Around her, the squad sprawled, bloodied but alive. The villagers huddled, crying, thanking them in broken English. Holt turned to her, sweat and soot streaking his face. His voice was rough but steady. You didn't hesitate this time. She met his gaze, heart pounding. No, I didn't. But inside, the unease remained. The officer was dead, but Hammerfall still loomed. And they had made enemies tonight, powerful ones. The war was shifting. And Danielle Mercer, warden, was right in the center. The smoke from the village still clung to Danielle's clothes when they staggered back into base 2 days later. Ash and dirt seemed embedded in her skin, and every step carried the weight of the villagers' eyes, fearful, grateful, broken. They had saved lives, yes, but they had also painted a target on themselves. The Russians and their mercenary allies would not forget what happened in that valley. The colonel was waiting when they entered the command tent, his face like stone. Holt dropped his pack with a thud, standing tall despite the exhaustion dragging at his limbs. Danielle followed, back straight, rifle slung. "Report," the colonel snapped. Holt laid it out. The comms intercepts, the ambush in the ravine, the village raid, the officer Danielle had finally taken down. He didn't embellish, didn't soften. When he finished, silence filled the tent, thick and heavy. The colonel's eyes pinned Danielle. "So you killed him this time?" She swallowed. "Yes, sir. You should have killed him the first time." His tone was flat, but the words cut deep. Her chest tightened. She had no defense. But Holt stepped in. "Sir, with respect," she made the call that saved civilians. Without her plan, that village would be a mass grave. "Whatever this hammerfall is, it hasn't launched yet. We still have time." The colonel's gaze lingered on Danielle, unreadable. Then he nodded curtly. "You'll debrief in full. Then you'll rest. Because hammerfall isn't waiting for you to catch your breath." They were dismissed, but Danielle could still feel his eyes burning into her back as she left. Sleep didn't come. Not really. Danielle lay in her cot, staring at the canvas ceiling, every muscle aching but her mind alive with images. The Russian officer falling, the villagers' cries, Holt's voice calling her warden. That name. It clung to her like smoke, impossible to wash off. Once, it had been a codename whispered in shadows, a title tied to missions buried so deep the world would never admit they happened. Now it was alive again, stitched into Holt's squad, into the colonel's orders. She wondered if she was Danielle Mercer at all anymore, or if Warden had swallowed her whole. By dawn, orders came. The squad was to move out within hours. Recon flights had spotted heavy movement along a canyon route to the north, dozens of trucks, armored carriers and fighters on foot. It was too coordinated, too large to be coincidence. Hammerfall was rolling. Holt gathered them in the motor pool, maps spread over the hood of a Humvee. His voice was low, steady, though the tension in his jaw was obvious. This isn't hit and run anymore. Hammerfall's a full offensive. If that convoy makes it through the canyon, they'll have the firepower to hit bases, towns, maybe even the airfield. Our job is to stop them, or at least stall them until reinforcements can hammer them from above. Finch let out a sharp laugh. "So, 6 of us against an army? Easy day." Rodriguez smacked him on the shoulder. "Shut up, Finch." But Danielle saw through the humor. Finch's hands trembled slightly as he checked his gear. The whole squad was stretched to breaking. And yet they would go. Because what else was there? She leaned over the map, tracing the canyon with her finger. "Here. Narrow bend, sheer cliffs. If we plant charges along the ridge, we can trap the lead vehicles, block the path. Force them into a choke." Holt nodded. "Good. We'll set an ambush by time. Air support is on standby, but they'll need a target painted." "Rodriguez, that's on you." The medic groaned. "Always me with the dangerous jobs." "You've got the best hands," Holt said. "Besides Mercer." His eyes flicked to her. "But she'll be busy keeping us alive." Danielle gave a thin smile. No pressure. By midday they were in position. The canyon was a jagged scar in the earth, walls rising high, echoing every sound. Danielle lay prone on the ridge, scope trained down the road. The sun beat down, heat waves shimmering. Dust plumes rose in the distance, engines many of them. Finch crawled past her, sweat dripping. "Charges are set. When this baby blows, it's gonna be biblical." She gave him a look. "Let's hope God's on our side." He grinned. "If not, I brought enough C4 to convert him." Then the convoy appeared, trucks rumbling, armored vehicles grinding forward, fighters marching in formation. It was a column of power, disciplined, purposeful. Danielle's chest tightened. This wasn't insurgents with rusty AKs. This was an army. Holt's voice was a low growl over comms. "Hold. Let them get deeper." The convoy snaked into the canyon, engines echoing off stone. Dust choked the air. Danielle watched through her scope, counting vehicles, noting positions. Dozens, maybe more. She spotted foreign fighters among them, Russians, contractors, hardened faces under helmets. "Now," Holt whispered. Finch squeezed the detonator. The world erupted. The canyon shook as charges tore through the cliffside. Rock cascaded down, crushing trucks, blocking the road. Fireballs lit the dust, screams echoing. The lead vehicles jackknifed, soldiers scattering. Chaos bloomed. "Open up!" Holt barked. The squad unleashed hell. Rifles cracked, grenades arced, mortars Finch had scavenged thumped into the column. Danielle picked off gunners, her shots precise, lethal. Trucks burned, fighters dove for cover, officers shouted in Russian and English alike. But the enemy adapted fast. Return fire lanced up the cliffs, bullets chewing rock around them. Rockets whooshed, explosions showering stone. Danielle ducked, heart hammering, then popped up to fire again. Rodriguez cursed, fumbling with the radio. "Jamming's heavy, but I've got a line. Painting target now." Holt covered him, firing bursts. "Call the birds now." The canyon became a storm. Danielle moved like instinct, firing, reloading, shifting positions. Holt barked orders, Finch laughed manically, Rodriguez prayed between transmissions. They were 6 against hundreds, but the choke point leveled the field. Minutes stretched into eternity. Then Danielle spotted it, a heavy armored vehicle grinding forward, cannon swiveling toward their ridge. Her blood iced. "Holt," she shouted. "They've got armor." His face tightened. "Finch." But Finch was already moving, strapping explosives to a launcher. He grinned wild. Time for fireworks. He popped up, shouldered the launcher, and fired. The rocket streaked, slamming into the armor. The blast rocked the canyon, fire billowing. Finch hooped, pumping a fist, then a bullet slammed into his chest. "Finch!" Danielle screamed. He toppled, rolling down the slope. Blood bloomed dark across his vest. Rodriguez scrambled to him, dragging him behind cover, shouting for hands, pressure, anything. Danielle's throat burned, rage boiling. She snapped up, sighted, and dropped the shooter with a cold, merciless shot. Her hands didn't shake this time. Above, the roar of engines grew. Shadows swept the canyon. A 10 screamed overhead, cannon spitting. Explosions ripped through the convoy, tearing vehicles apart, scattering fighters like ants. The canyon lit with fire and thunder. The squad ducked, covering their ears as the airstrike carved Hammerfall to pieces. When the dust settled, silence fell. Smoke curled from wreckage. Bodies littered the canyon floor. The column was shattered, burned to ruins. Hammerfall was broken. But Finch was still bleeding. Rodriguez pressed frantically, swearing, shouting. Holt crouched beside him, voice rough. "Stay with us, damn it." Danielle knelt, gripping Finch's hand. His eyes fluttered open, blood on his lips. He gave her a weak grin. "Yes, God was on our side after all," he rasped. Then his eyes went still. Silence crashed over them heavier than the airstrike. Danielle's chest hollowed. She had seen death before, but this, Finch's laugh, his jokes, gone, it ripped through her. Holt's jaw clenched, grief flashing before his mask hardened. "We move," he said hoarsely. "We can't stay here." They gathered what they could, leaving nothing for the enemy, and climbed from the canyon. Behind them, Hammerfall's wreckage smoldered, a graveyard of steel and fire. But victory felt hollow. That night, in a safe house miles away, Danielle sat apart, staring at her rifle. Finch's grin haunted her, his blood still on her gloves. Holt sat near the door, silent, lost in thought. Rodriguez drank from a flask, eyes red. Finally Holt spoke. His voice was raw, steady only by force. "We stopped them today. Saved bases, convoys, civilians. But don't kid yourselves, we'll pay for it. They'll regroup. And Finch, he's the first, but he won't be the last." Danielle looked up, meeting his gaze. "Then we make it mean something. Every step, every fight. We don't waste what we've lost." For the first time, Holt's hard expression cracked. He nodded once. Warden's right. The name no longer shocked her. It felt earned. But it carried weight, a mantle she couldn't put down. Outside, the desert wind howled. The war was far from over. And somewhere, in smoke-filled rooms far from the battlefield, someone was already planning Phase 3. That the sun was just breaking through a veil of ash when the sound of rotor blades thundered over the smoldering ridge. Dust swirled in gritty whirlwinds as medevac Black Hawks descended, their side gunners scanning the ruins for movement. Soldiers huddled behind crumbled walls looked up with exhausted relief, but their eyes remained wary. Nobody cheered yet. They knew better. Too many times extraction had turned into ambush. Maya stood on the ledge of a shattered stairwell, her uniform caked in soot and blood, her rifle cradled loosely across her chest. She had been awake for almost 36 hours, maybe more, but she couldn't feel the exhaustion anymore. Only the quiet hum of adrenaline and the weight of what she had just done. The man who had orchestrated 3 massacres was dead because of her. General Barakov's compound was burning behind her, its ammunition stores detonating in rolling blasts that shook the valley. The colonel jogged toward her through rubble, ducking instinctively as another secondary explosion sent a plume of fire skyward. His face was streaked with grime, and one sleeve of his combat jacket was torn from shoulder to elbow, but his eyes burned with something fierce. He stopped in front of her, breathing hard. "You pulled it off," he said, his voice caught somewhere between disbelief and grim admiration. "The bastard's gone." Maya nodded slowly. She wasn't smiling. "It's not over," she said, glancing past him at the soldiers guiding the wounded toward the waiting birds. "Killing Barakov doesn't erase the network. Someone will step in. Someone always does." The colonel set his jaw, then followed her gaze to the smoke curling toward the pale sky. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he reached into his vest, pulled out a folded sheet of paper and pressed it into her hand. It was damp with sweat, creased almost to the point of tearing. "What is this?" she asked. "Orders," he replied. "Straight from the Pentagon. I wasn't supposed to show you until after this op." She unfolded the paper, eyes flicking over the words. Her stomach tightened. A name stood out in bold letters, Project Nightshade. "You knew?" she asked quietly, her throat suddenly dry. The colonel shook his head. "Not everything. Only that you were part of it. That your code name wasn't some bureaucratic joke. They built something around you, Maya. Something they're still running." Before she could respond, gunfire cracked from the far treeline. Shouts rose. A squad of enemy fighters, ragged but determined, had emerged from the smoke with RPGs slung over their shoulders. The perimeter defense opened fire immediately. A rocket spiraled toward one of the Black Hawks, striking just short of its tail and rocking the aircraft sideways. Soldiers screamed for cover. Maya didn't hesitate. She shouldered her rifle and sprinted down the rubble, barking orders as if her body had already rehearsed the fight. The colonel followed, drawing his sidearm. Bullets kicked up sparks from broken stone as the remnants of Barakov's guard made their final stand. The firefight was brutal and short. Maya led a flanking push through a collapsed section of wall, clearing 3 hostiles in rapid succession, her movements fluid, precise. She didn't think about the fact that her hands were trembling, or that her chest ached with every breath. She just fought until the last insurgent lay bleeding in the dirt. When silence finally returned, the Black Hawks were already lifting off, carrying the wounded and a few prisoners. Maya leaned against a wall, trying to catch her breath. The colonel holstered his pistol and looked at her again, his expression unreadable. "You're not just a soldier," he said. "You're their weapon. And now you know." She stared back, the paper still crumpled in her fist. Project Nightshade. The words burned like acid in her mind. Hours later, the survivors regrouped at Forward Operating Base Mercer, a makeshift fortress of blast walls and tents that smelled of diesel and dust. The wounded were sent to triage, the dead laid out under olive tarps. Soldiers moved quietly, subdued, as though laughter or even conversation would dishonor the cost of the mission. Maya sat at the edge of a cot, stripping and cleaning her rifle. Each piece slid into place with methodical rhythm, her mind elsewhere. She could still hear the explosion of Barakov's ammunition dump, still feel the heat against her face. But it wasn't victory that pressed down on her chest. It was the question of what she had become. A shadow fell across her. She looked up to see Captain Reyes, his arm in a sling, his face pale but eyes sharp. "You did it," he said softly. "You got him." Maya said nothing. She reassembled the rifle and locked the magazine into place. Reyes lowered himself onto the cot beside her, wincing. "I heard the colonel talking. About that code name. Bah. Nightshade. You gonna tell me what it means?" Her jaw tightened. "I don't even know. Not really." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Doesn't matter. Whatever they call you, whatever project they buried you in, you're still you. The one who saved my ass in Cuner. The one who dragged 3 guys out of that burning Humvee last month. Don't let them take that away." Maya looked at him, and for the first time since the mission ended, she felt the sting of tears. She blinked them back, unwilling to let them fall. Before she could respond, the base loudspeakers crackled to life. "Incoming. Incoming. All personnel shelter." A whistling scream cut through the air. "Mortars." The first round detonated just outside the wire, showering dirt across the tents. Chaos erupted. Soldiers dove for cover, medics dragged patients to bunkers, alarms wailed. Maya and Reyes hit the dirt as another blast shook the ground. The colonel's voice roared over the comms, ordering counter-battery fire. But as Maya pressed her face against the floor, she realized something was wrong. The mortars weren't coming in random arcs. They were targeted. Someone had given away their exact coordinates. She crawled to the radio station, bullets of dirt striking around her from fresh impacts. The operator inside was panicking, headphones slipping down his neck. They're hitting us dead on. They shouldn't even know we're here. Maya's gut twisted. Barakov was dead, but his network wasn't. They had a mole. By nightfall the attack ended. The base was scarred but still standing. Several tents burned, and the air reeked of cordite and charred nylon. Soldiers dug out craters with shovels, searching for unexploded ordnance. Maya sat in the command tent with the colonel, Reyes, and 2 intel officers. A map was spread across the table, dotted with red markers. The colonel stabbed a finger at the map. They knew exactly where to hit. Somebody on the inside fed them our position. Until we flush out the leak, we're sitting ducks. Maya's eyes narrowed. Barakov's men were carrying encrypted sat phones. They wouldn't have cracked our location without inside help. She hesitated, then added quietly, and this has nightshade stink all over it. The intel officers exchanged uneasy glances. What do you mean? The colonel asked. I mean someone doesn't want me to come home, Maya said. Her voice was calm, but beneath it ran a river of cold fury. Someone inside our own system. Project Nightshade wasn't about making soldiers better. It was about control. And now they're testing how far they can push me. The tent was silent. Even Reyes, who usually had a joke to cut the tension, said nothing. Finally, the colonel leaned forward. Then we fight back. But not just against what's out there. Against what's in here. The following days blurred into a mix of patrols, investigations, and sleepless nights. Maya found herself studying every face on base, searching for cracks in composure, for the flicker of guilt. The colonel quietly reassigned certain personnel, splitting squads in ways that forced trust and suspicion to collide. Tensions rose. And in the middle of it all, Maya kept moving. Missions didn't stop just because secrets festered. She led raids, cleared compounds, negotiated with terrified villagers who saw every uniform as a potential executioner. Through it all, she kept her humor sharp, using dry quips to cut through fear, to remind her soldiers that they were still human. One evening, as the sky burned orange over the desert, Reyes found her sitting on a supply crate, eating an MRE with little appetite. He dropped beside her and offered a canteen. You ever think about what comes after? He asked. She gave him a sidelong look. After what? This deployment? The war. He shrugged. After all of it. When it's quiet. When nobody's shooting at us. Maya snorted softly. That'll be the day. Then more seriously she added, I don't know if I'll get that. I don't even know if I'm supposed to. Reyes didn't push. He just sat there, the silence between them both heavy and strangely comforting. That night, she dreamed of Barakov's eyes in the moment before she pulled the trigger. Not fear, not anger, recognition. As though he had known exactly who she was and what she represented. She woke in a cold sweat, her heart hammering. The colonel was waiting outside her tent at dawn. He didn't speak at first, just handed her a folder. She opened it, scanning quickly. It wasn't a report. It was a list. Names. Some she knew, some she didn't. At the top was hers. Targets? She asked quietly. Operatives? The colonel said grimly. Nightshade operatives. Embedded across units, across commands. This wasn't just about you. You're one of dozens. The weight of it crushed the air from her lungs. She closed the folder slowly, her hands steady only because she forced them to be. What now? She asked. The colonel met her gaze, his expression carved from stone. Now we decide if we're going to play their game, or burn it down. Maya looked past him at the horizon, where the sun was rising again over a scarred and restless land. She thought of the soldiers depending on her, of Reyes and his steady loyalty, of the families who would never know the names of the networks pulling strings behind their children's deaths. Her decision, she realized, wasn't just about survival. It was about whether she could live with herself if she stayed silent. She tightened her grip on the folder. Then we burn it down. The colonel gave a single, grim nod. In the distance, the rumble of engines echoed across the plain. Convoys moving, battles preparing, the endless churn of war. Maya felt the familiar pulse of adrenaline return, but now it carried something sharper. A resolve not born of orders or code names or projects. A resolve born of choice. And as she stepped toward the sound of the fight, the mystery of Project Nightshade still hung over her like a storm cloud, dark, heavy, and waiting to break. The end.